My name is Andrea Martinez, and I'm the Archivist at the Pritzker Military Museum and Library. Welcome to this special Women's History Month program that explores the history of the Army Nurse Corps. This program will also highlight 3 archival collections held at the museum and library from Nurse Corps veterans who served in World War I, World War II, and during the Cold War era. The museum and library is once again open to the public with reduced capacity and social distancing protocols in place. However, we will continue to offer virtual programming in an effort to keep our guests, staff, and constituents safe and healthy. Before we begin, I would like to take a moment to thank our members and donors for their support of the museum and library. We are proud to be part of your military history exploration. In this webinar format, you can post questions or comments in the Q&A feed, and we will address those at the end. This program is being recorded and will be available on our website to stream. Military nursing in the United States dates back to the Revolutionary War. As the colonies had no formalized nursing corps established at the outbreak of the war, the United States Army used either family members or soldiers pulled from the front to help care for the wounded. By 1775, the Second Continental Congress approved funds for medical support at a rate of 1 nurse to 10 patients and 1 matron to supervise per camp. These military nurses were considered civilians. Women nurses disappeared from military roles until the Civil War. A week after the attack on Fort Sumter, Dorothea Dix, a social reformer, became the Union's superintendent for all female Army nurses. Dix served in this unpaid position for the entirety of the war. Under Dix's leadership, more than 3,000 women served as nurses. Other organizations supported volunteer nurses during this period also. The Spanish-American War in 1898 brought epidemics of typhoid fever and other tropical diseases to the troops, which rendered the hospital corps unable to meet military healthcare needs. The Surgeon General appointed Dr. Anita Newcomb McGee as acting Assistant Surgeon General. Dr. McGee oversaw nursing selection, and she required that nurses have to have graduated from training school and had a favorable recommendation. Around 1,500 contract nurses served during the Spanish-American War. And this was the first war that the United States was involved in, where nurses were assigned and served as a special quasi-military unit. At the turn of the century, a movement began to make the Nurse Corps a permanent part of the Army Medical Department. Dr. McGee pushed to establish a permanent Nurse Corps and contributed to the Army Reorganization Act, which Congress passed on February 2, 1901. This act enabled the nurses to become a permanent medical department under the Army. Nurses were appointed in the regular Army for 3 years, but were not actually commissioned officers in the regular Army. The newly established Army Nurse Corps was for women only. Although male nurses had served in small numbers during the Spanish-American War, the Corps would not officially allow men to serve until 1955. And the Corps also excluded Black women for many years and remained largely white until the end of World War II. During the years leading up to World War I, the Nurse Corps grew and became more established. World War I would be the first armed conflict that the U.S. would enter with an organized Nurse Corps. When the U.S. entered the war in 1917, there were only 403 nurses on active duty. Over the course of the war, around 22,000 nurses would serve overall, and around 10,000 of those would serve overseas. Nurses served with the French forces as well as the British and American Expeditionary Forces. While no nurses were killed from combat, around 266 nurses died from disease or accidents. The museum and library's collection includes a scrapbook from Mabel Loonberg. Mabel Victoria Loonberg served during World War I with the Army Nurse Corps. She was born on October 21, 1889, in Pecatonica, Illinois. Her parents, Carl and Johanna, were Swedish immigrants that came to the United States in 1870. While stateside, Mabel had served at Base Hospital 14 in San Francisco. She served overseas in France starting in July of 1918 and returned home in July of 1919 on SS Rotterdam. Mabel continued to work as a nurse after the war. Loonberg's scrapbook is filled with photographs. Some of the photographs show Mabel and other nurses posing in their uniforms. Others show nurses hard at work, like this image of women shoveling. And these images are of Mabel and other service members during their downtime. This collection also includes portraits of friends she made during her service. And these pictures of the French countryside and from the trenches are souvenir photographs, which were mass-produced for purchase. By the end of World War I, many in the armed forces had seen and benefited from organized nurse care. Changes in status and retirement, both topics that were addressed previously but rejected, were now legislated. Nurses also lobbied for full military status. In 1920, a bill was passed that granted nurses relative rank in the grades of second lieutenant to major. This law entitled nurses to wear insignia of their rank, but they were still to be addressed as Miss or Nurse, and their pay was about half of a male officer's at the same rank. During the interwar period, the Corps numbers shrunk. By 1935, only around 603 nurses were on active duty. There were also no reserve nurses until World War II mobilization efforts started. The United States entered World War II on December 7, 1941. Over the course of the war, approximately 56,800 nurses would serve, and about 32,500 of those nurses served overseas. This is the largest group of nurses to ever be in the Army Nurse Corps, and they served all over the world. Innovations were made over the course of the war. Army nurses in the European theater assisted in developing the concept of the recovery ward for immediate and post-op nursing care. Fixed-wing airplanes were used for evacuations from combat zones, which quickly brought patients to treatment, and flight nurses helped to lower the number of patient deaths during transport. During World War II, 60 nurses were killed in enemy action. Nurses were also taken as prisoner of war. The most infamous of those were captured in the Philippines by the Japanese, known as the Angels of Bataan. When Bataan and Corregidor fell in 1941, 78 nurses, 66 of them Army nurses, were imprisoned around Manila. They continued to serve in their nursing roles as POWs until their release in March of 1945. And the museum collection also includes a scrapbook from Rose Teplitsky. Rose served in the Army Nurse Corps during World War II. She was born in Russia on February 22, 1911, and grew up in Chicago. During the war, she served with the 125th Evacuation Hospital and was stationed overseas in France and Germany. By the end of the war, Rose had been promoted to the rank of captain. Rose's collection includes a scrapbook containing personal photographs like these of Rose and other service members, both stateside and in France and Germany. Other photographs show evacuation hospitals. Some of the photographs she has are souvenir photographs like these of France. And her collection also includes several postcards from service members, either acknowledging her most recent letter to them, telling her about the weather, or updating her on their lives. This letter from the headquarters of Army Ground Forces thanks Rose for her service during the war. The Corps continued to evolve post-demobilization. In the years after the war, active duty nurses went from 57,000 to 8,500. On April 16, 1947, Congress established the Army Nurse Corps in the medical department of the regular Army. The Army-Navy Nurse Act of 1947 also provided permanent commissioned officer status for members of the Army Nurse Corps in the grades of second lieutenant through lieutenant colonel, and for the chief of the Army Corps to serve in temporary grade of colonel. This act also established the Army Nurse Corps section of the Officer Reserve Corps. 5 days after U.S. troops landed in the Republic of Korea, 56 nurses landed in Busan. From 1950 to 1953, 540 Army nurses served on the Korean Peninsula. During the war, mobile surgical unit hospitals followed the front lines, which allowed for quicker medical care for injured soldiers. Also, helicopter evacuations brought seriously wounded to medical care faster, leading to significantly decreased death rates. Army nurses continued to serve in Korea after the war to provide instruction to Republic of Korea nursing students and other corpsmen. Nurses also traveled to other countries to assist in the building of nursing programs. Additionally, stateside education programs and career development increased. During this period, the Nurse Corps also participated in humanitarian work and troop support. In the late 1950s, 3 nurses went to Vietnam to assist the U.S. Military Advisory Group in Saigon. They were the first 3 Army nurses to serve in Vietnam. Over 5,000 nurses served in support of combat troops during the Vietnam War. As the Nurse Corps was expected to fulfill its peacetime commitments as well as supply nurses to the war in Vietnam, the shortage of nurses to serve in the Corps was severe. In 1966, the Selective Service System issued a draft calling for 900 male nurses for the Army and Navy Nurse Corps. The war brought innovations in trauma and combat casualty care. Medical evacuations continued to progress and made ICU nursing the standard. Shock and trauma units also grew during this time. The Army decorated hundreds of nurses for bravery and distinguished service. One of those nurses was First Lieutenant Sharon Lane, who was posthumously awarded the Bronze Star Medal after she was killed when a North Vietnamese rocket struck the 312th Evacuation Hospital. Lane was the only American servicewoman to be killed as a direct result of enemy fire. 7 other nurses died over the course of the war from injury or illness. On June 11, 1970, Anne May Hayes, the 13th Chief of the Army Nurse Corps, made history when she was the first female in the U.S. Armed Forces to be promoted to the rank of General Officer. Brigadier General Hayes had served in the Nurse Corps since World War II. In the 1970s and 80s, the Army Nurse Corps pushed towards enhancing the quality of care through clinical specialization and expanding nursing roles. Army Medical Department courses educated 8 categories of nursing specialists, such as anesthesiology and pediatrics. By 1976, all newly commissioned officers in the Army Nurse Corps were required to possess a bachelor's degree. During this time, officers of the Corps participated in activities throughout the world, including many humanitarian missions and in countries like Jordan and Cuba and China. The Corps also supported combat troops in Grenada in 1983 and aided in relief efforts during Hurricane Hugo. The final collection from the museum library that I will show today is the Elizabeth Bohling Collection. Elizabeth was born on August 2, 1947. She earned a bachelor's in nursing in 1976 from the University of Alabama and a master's in nursing from Rush University in 1992. She served in the Army Nurse Corps for 30 years. By her retirement in 2007, Elizabeth had been promoted to the rank of colonel. Her archival collection includes photographs from her military service, orders, and documents, as well as uniform pieces. Here we have 2 pieces from Elizabeth's green service uniform. The jacket includes insignia pins for the Army Nurse Corps on the lapels, and colonel rank insignia and insignia for the U.S. Army Center for Health Promotion and Preventative Medicine on the shoulder straps. There is also a U.S. Army Medical Command shoulder sleeve insignia on the left shoulder. Her ribbon bar shows that she was awarded the Army Commendation Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the Army Achievement Medal with 1 oak leaf cluster, the Army Reserve Component Achievement Medal with 2 oak leaf clusters, the National Defense Service Medal with 1 service star, the Armed Forces Reserve Medal with a silver hourglass device, and an Army Service Medal. Throughout the 1990s, the Nurse Corps continued its service in peace, war, and humanitarian missions. It participated in Operation Desert Storm and Operation Restore Hope. In the 2000s, they served in Operation Enduring Freedom as well as Operation Iraqi Freedom. The Nurse Corps is still active today. Thousands of women have served and dedicated themselves to the U.S. Army Nurse Corps. Even when they did not receive the pay or recognition they deserved, Nurse Corps members delivered high-quality nursing care and compassion for their fellow soldiers, making it an essential part of the military. Their specialized skills and innovations have helped save thousands of lives. Thank you for tuning in. If you enjoyed this program and are looking for more engaging content, be sure to visit our website for a list of free videos on a host of thought-provoking topics. If you're not a member of the museum and library already, please consider becoming one today. Our membership community is vital to supporting the activities that help fulfill our mission and vision. Thank you for joining us today.